The nature of this world is change, and when you refuse this rule, you become Ubisoft. This story is not about one company rise and fall, it's about ambition, broken promises, and the cost to creators, to players, and the culture that once promised innovation. This is Ubisoft's downfall. Ubisoft's roots go back to the 1986, when the Guillemot family began importing computer components into Brittany, France. From those modest beginnings, they built a publishing and development powerhouse. In the 1990s, Ubisoft acquired rights to localize and publish major Western titles in France and Europe, giving them early revenue streams and distributing leverages. They gradually moved into in-house development. They made their mark by acquiring and nurturing big IPs, Tom Clancy, Prince of Persia, and pushing into new franchises. Over time, Ubisoft's reputation was one of ambition, building open worlds, trying bold ideas, and scaling large global studios. For decades, that reputation would sustain them, but also seed their undoing. So the golden era of Ubisoft was the mid-2000s. Ubisoft had entered a golden era. Assassin's Creed launched in 2007 and quickly became a defining franchise. Far Cry, Rayman, Splinter Cell, Just Dance, these were marquee names in their portfolio. They pioneered a model, dozens of studios around the world, many operating as a support studios collaborating with one large titles. The idea was scale, specialization. Each studio focuses on a piece, AI, animation, world building, QA, which multiple AAA companies do the same. In 2024, Ubisoft reported record sales of $2.3 billion, 26.8% compared to the previous year. Operating profits reached £313.6 million. At that time, digital revenue, DLC, microtransaction, in-game purchases accounted for 85.6% of their profits. On the player side, Ubisoft claimed 138 million unique active users across its PC, console, and all the other platforms. A growth of 4% increase. Total playtime of users rose 12%. Rainbow Six Siege continued to be a golden goose. Its new receipt reportedly jumped more than 50%. It looked like Ubisoft had cracked code, strong IPs, global studios, digital revenue, and dominance. A time came that you cannot wake up in a week and don't see an article about Ubisoft. But not everything was smooth. Around 2014 to 2015, Assassin's Creed Unity launched with a catastrophic bugs, frame rate issues, and broken features. Ubisoft was forced to temporarily pull it out from digital storefronts and issue refunds and patches. Marketing expectation began to output internal capacity. Many franchises got manual or semi-annual releases, pushing developer into crunch, scope cutbacks, and under-delivering promises made in marketing. Games like Watch Dogs 2014 was large marketing pushes with features promised that were later trimmed. Players and critics accused Ubisoft of downgrading graphics and overhyping, all to suck up for the investors. Meanwhile, as costs exploded, the pressure to monetize more aggressively mounted. Free-to-play and service elements creep into what had once been premium single-player experiences. In 2020, Ubisoft faced conic. Multiple employees came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct, harassment, and toxic leadership. Among those implicated was Serge Haschat, I'm sorry if I pronounced the name wrong, a former chief executive officer accused of bullying, pushing undesired romantic advances, and fostering a boys' club culture. Investigation revealed that many HR complaints had been ignored, buried, and swept aside for years. Ubisoft responded with sweeping statements, promises of internal reform, new workplaces, and bouncing to culture metrics. But insiders later suggested that many changes were cosmetics, and the same toxic norms persisted in lower levels. Another case was Mikhail Ankel, the visionary behind Beyond Good and Evil. So apparently he was neither a good visionary or a person. Reportedly ran development on Beyond Good and Evil 2 with erratic style, frequent shifts in directions, and a leadership style that some described as dictatorship. Some internal teams quietly resisted, less documented publicly but hinted in industry writing and dev discussions. Through this period, morale dipped. Talented mid-level devs quietly left, studios began to lose institutional memory. Voices of dissent were often stifled, loyalty was prized over truth. By 2022, Ubisoft was overextended. It was funding dozens of high-cost projects in parallel. Some were core AAA sequels, other experimental IPs. The pipeline was crowded, but the hits were few. Between September 2022 and March 2024, Ubisoft laid off roughly 1,700 employees, shrinking to 19,011 staff globally. In earlier 2022, the company had peak headcount of 20,655 globally. Yet the efficiency metric raised eyebrows. Ubisoft generated about 96,403 USD in revenue per employee, which for a AAA publisher is extremely low. For comparison, Capcom with fewer staff was generating multiple of that per employee. R&D spending surged. In FY 2023, Ubisoft reportedly spent £1.44 billion on R&D, almost 74% higher than the previous record year of 2021. Many projects struggled. Ex-Defendant, launched in May 2024, hit 1 million unique players in just 2.5 hours. Within 48 hours it had 3 million, but after weak monetization and player drop-off, Ubisoft announced cancellation in December 2024. As part of shutting down Ex-Defense, Ubisoft closed Ubisoft San Francisco and Ubisoft Osaka, laying off 277 roles. We're talking about 277 people with a family, maybe a family of 3, maybe a family of 5. So we're talking about a very big scale here, guys. In January 2025, Ubisoft also shut down its Leamington studio in the UK. Meanwhile, major titles underperformed. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, Skull and Bones, Star Wars Outlaws, we know how bad that was. Also poor reception, weak post-launch retention, or failing player metrics. In May 2025, Ubisoft announced its new bookings had dropped 20.5% year-on-year, largely due to delays, underperforming titles. Its stock fell 20% in one day, the steepest drop in over a decade. The company projected it would only break even on operating profit for FY ending March of 2026. Simultaneously, in March 2025, Ubisoft formed a new spin-off comprising Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six, valued at £4 billion. Tencent invested of £1.6 billion for a 25% stake. This move briefly boosted Ubisoft shares by 10.5%, but many analytics saw it as a last-ditch attempt to monetize more IPs or to attract investors for the last time while letting the rest of the business shrinks. By the early 2025, Ubisoft's share price had hit multi-year lows, dipping under £8 per share, the weakest since 2013. Peak value in 2018, Ubisoft shares approached £100 at a time, so see the drop, guys. From January 2021, when the company market cap was 12.17 billion, to early 2025, it slumped into 1.78 billion, an 85% percentage collapse. Collapse in investor trust, creative stability, and execution discipline. What people don't know, that the parts that rarely show up in headlines, the undercurrents and the structural roots. Because Ubisoft studios often operate autonomously, creative leads sometimes defend their own vision at the expense of coordination or synergies. This led to duplicated work, inconsistent systems, and inefficient hidden behind studio pride. Multiple insiders have remarked that descent upward was discouraged studios, directors, and let often felt pressure to comply with the executive mandates rather than pushback. Over time, this silenced critical reviews, leading to a blind spot. In the push of new content, old systems, engines, and tools were neglected, not just improved. Several internal devs leaked or discussed privately, mentioning frustration at archive tools, buggy middleware, or the lack of engineering support. While Ubisoft disclosed headlines, budgets, internal overruns are rarely public. Industry analytics speculate that games like Star Wars Outlaws, the biggest flaw, cost 250 to 300 million to develop, and yet failed to recoup expectations. Beyond official layoff, many skilled developers resigned quietly. Burnout, low trust, and lack of growth opportunities. Studios like Montreal and Paris reportedly saw high turnover in mid-level staff, undermining continuity. Franchises like Beyond Good and Evil languished in development hell. Ubisoft shelved or cancelled interesting experiments to double down on safer sequels. Over time, players and critics grew fatigue of incremental iterations. Tencent already held 10% stake in Ubisoft prior of this spin-off. Through financial and strategic ties, it gradually influenced direction, more leaning into live services and platform parity with the Chinese gaming norm. Even after multiple allegations of misconduct, Ubisoft leadership was slow to act. Many companies were known internally for years before any public acknowledgement. That delay indicated reputational damage hard to recover from. Let's look to a specific data points and game launches that highlights the collapse. X-Defend launched May 2024, hit 1 million unique players in 2.5 hours and 3 million in 48 hours, but monetization and retention failed. By December 2024, Ubisoft shut it down and refunded DLCs. Star Wars Outlaws cost estimated range of 229 and 275 millions, but it failed qualitatively to meet the expectation. Assassin's Creed Shadows, the biggest failure of all, launched at March 2025. Ubisoft announced 1 million players on day 1 and 3 million within the first week. On Steam, it hit 41,000 at launch, later rising to 64 over its first weekend, highest for an AC game on Steam. By July 2025, Shadows accumulated 5 million unique players. These numbers are respectable, and Ubisoft claimed Shadows delivered on expectation, but in context, they still sit behind the scale, retention, and monetization needed to reverse the downward spiral. As for corporate finance, in May 2025, Ubisoft net bookings were down 20.5% year-on-year. That one-day churn plunged 90 to 20%, the steepest in over a decade. Market capitalization collapsed from 12.17 billion in 2021 to 1.7 billion by January 2025, an 85% drop. Again guys, this is USD dollar, not pound. Share recently even dipped below 8 pound per share before small rebounds to 8.8 pound. In March 2025, Tencent 1.16 billion into the new IP spin-off temporarily pushed shares upward 10% gain to 14.30 pound. But many saw this as a squeezing of lifeblood. It's the last attempt of trying to survive. Ubisoft's downfall isn't inevitable. The mistakes made are instructive, especially for game devs and studios of any size. What should we learn from Ubisoft? Balance between core and experiment, please. Maintain accountability and feedback loops. Stop doubling down. Avoid overextension. You should not prioritize technical health and tool infrastructure. Cultural safety is not optional at all. Respect players and trust over monetization, and stop sucking the dick of the investors. Respond early to crisis. It's simple things that even indie studios have in their pipelines, and Ubisoft failed because they failed to remember the basics. Change is only constant. Ubisoft once danced with change, experimenting, growing, pushing boundaries, but at some point they stopped evolving. The rot set in. The story is not mere corporate drama. It's a mirror for every developer, for every studio, for every creative, even as you build your passion project. You must guard against complacency, toxicity, overreach. Will Ubisoft survive? Maybe. Will it emerge reinvigorated? That depends on lessons they learned, not just capital injected. And for all of us watching, learning, building, we must ask, can we avoid their mistake? So, thank you for watching. If you like this deep dive into Ubisoft or this kind of videos, please drop me a comment so I can know that. Consider subscribing, sharing, and let me know what studio collabs or history you want me to cover next. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.